In 1920, the United States implemented a law called Prohibition, which made the sale of alcoholic beverages illegal. Even though the supply of liquor was stopped, there was still a demand for it, and as a result, organized crime took advantage of this opportunity to fill the gap. This marked the beginning of the era of bootleggers. Alphonse Gabriel Capone, at the age of 25, became the leader of criminal activities in Chicago. Capone went on to become one of the most notorious figures of the 20th century. His name became almost synonymous with organized crime itself. Today, we will discuss some lesser-known facts about Al Capone. But before we get started, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Interesting Day. If there's one thing Americans enjoy, it's a captivating story of going from poverty to wealth, even if there are some illegal activities involved in the middle. In a similar vein, Al Capone started his life near the lower end of society. He was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1899 to Italian-American immigrant parents. The family resided in a rundown apartment near the Naval Yards. This neighborhood was always bustling with sailors and soldiers seeking alcohol and prostitutes. However, Capone's background was not exactly what one might expect. His father, originally from Naples, was well-educated and cultured. The family was seen as professional and respectable. In fact, during his early years, Al himself had no trouble staying on the right path. It was during his teenage years that his dangerous side started to emerge. At the age of 14, he began to show delinquent behavior and reportedly even assaulted a female teacher in his school. This incident led to his expulsion. During that time, New York City was filled with various street gangs, such as the Hudson Dusters and the Gopher Gang. Capone became a member of the well-known 5 Points gang in the city. He showed exceptional skills in his work and eventually made his way into organized crime through his association with Johnny Torrio, a powerful boss who, like Capone's father, came from Naples. Capone gained the underworld nickname Scarface, which was so cool that it even inspired 3 movies on its own. So, how did he earn this nickname? After being expelled from school, Capone found employment as a bouncer at a local club called the Harvard Inn. One night, while working at the door, he became interested in a woman named Lena Galluccio. He offered to take her for a walk on the beach, but she declined his offer. Not one to give up easily, Al persisted, and later in the evening, he shouted a comment about liking her backside. Al intended it as a compliment, but Lena's brother, Frank Galluccio, took offense to it. Though Frank was smaller than Al, he had a knife and used it to slash Capone's face 3 times. And the marks left in their wake would establish the foundation for one of the most notorious aliases in the chronicles of criminality. While the world knew him as Scarface, Al's buddies had a slightly less intimidating nickname for him, Snorky. Yes, you heard it right, Snorky. One of the most notorious mob bosses in history was affectionately called Snorky by his friends. Why? Well, in 1920 Chicago, Snorky was gang slang for stylish dresser, and Capone had a weakness for fancy Italian suits. History also mentions that his pals sometimes referred to him as the big fellow, but that one doesn't require much explanation. Al Capone had a taste for the finer things. Apart from his love for tailored suits, when Capone started raking in cash, he splurged a significant portion on his wardrobe. In fact, it was known that Capone would shell out around $500 for his outfits. It might not sound like a lot, but when converted to 1920s prices, it equates to almost $7,000 in today's value. Naturally, if you're spending that much on your attire, you wouldn't want to see it torn with bullet holes or stained with gangster-related liquids. And neither did Al. To safeguard his expensive suits and, presumably, his life, he had a 1928 Cadillac V8 Town sedan reinforced with armored plating. This car was loaded with 3,000 pounds of steel plates and featured bulletproof glass windows, essentially transforming it into a tank. Playing golf with the boss is a long-standing American custom, and the mobsters were no exception. Capone and his crew thoroughly enjoyed hitting the golf course. However, their true pleasure came from causing a bit of mayhem. The Capone gang was notorious for heavy drinking during their rounds and placing outrageous bets on just about anything. Additionally, it was common knowledge that they kept firearms tucked away in their golf bags. After all, when you were in the company of a gangster in 1920 Chicago, a gunfight could erupt at any moment, anywhere. During a golf outing in September of 1928, Capone joined forces with fellow mobsters Fred the Killer Burke, Jake Greasy Thumb Guzik, and Machine Gun Jack McGurn. While searching for a specific club in his bag, Capone accidentally grabbed his revolver, causing it to discharge a shot. He was swiftly rushed to St. Margaret's Hospital for treatment. To maintain a low profile and, presumably, to conceal his clumsiness, Capone registered under the alias El Aguirre, ensuring that nobody would discover his mishap. Capone had an extravagant spending habit, splurging on luxurious attire, valuable gems, and state-of-the-art cars equipped with protective features and advanced gadgets. Surprisingly, his spending spree never seemed to deplete his funds. As a prominent figure in Chicago, Capone was engaged in many kinds of illegal activities. Through these ventures, he managed to accumulate an astonishing fortune. It is estimated that during the 1920s, Capone earned approximately $100 million annually. Considering inflation, his wealth today would surpass $1.3 billion. To maintain control over the criminal activities in Chicago, Al Capone had a straightforward objective: eliminate anyone who posed a threat, regardless of whether they were rivals or customers. Crossing paths with Capone meant facing dire consequences, as he had no qualms about ending lives. Naturally, such a high body count raised suspicions and inquiries. However, Capone had a solution. To protect his men from legal trouble, he employed an unprecedented number of police officers, politicians, lawyers, and judges who were on his payroll. He spent millions annually on bribes to ensure their loyalty and cooperation, effectively keeping the establishment on his side and out of his way. While Capone possessed a sharp criminal mind, it eventually faltered as his life progressed. At the age of 18, he contracted syphilis but neglected to seek medical treatment. The untreated disease had severe consequences, gradually eroding his mental faculties. By the 1940s, it was reported that Capone's intellectual capacity was equivalent to that of a 7-year-old. During his time in prison, he required specialized care and exhibited erratic behavior, often lashing out at nurses and muttering to himself. Towards the end of his life, he was described as a mere shadow of his former self. Now it might sound like a story from a Hollywood movie. Two brothers, James Vincenzo Capone and Al Capone, took different paths in life. James became a Prohibition Task Force member, while Al became a notorious bootlegger. James, under the name Richard Hart, worked as a marshal in Homer, Nebraska, conducting raids on bootleggers using disguises and deception. Al Capone, besides his criminal activities, had a philanthropic side, opening soup kitchens during the Great Depression and advocating for milk bottles to display expiration dates. He enjoyed attention and hired his own press agent during his federal trial. Capone was eventually convicted of tax evasion and sentenced to prison, where his influence persisted. He was later transferred to Alcatraz, where his reputation failed to protect him, and he was assaulted by a fellow inmate. His syphilis infection caused his mental deterioration, and he was eventually granted parole but suffered from the disease until his death in 1947. Which of these facts about Al Capone surprised you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for joining us on Interesting Day. See you next time.